Welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to be talking about something very important. What is an ideal society? A lot of us have seen our world change over the decades, and we've seen our experiments with democracy, with communism, with socialism. Now the world is sort of gravitating in those directions, Marxism. We've had monarchy in the past. Then we've had democracy, we've had capitalism and all kinds of different forms of government and different forms of economy. The Vedas offer a very different solution. It's called sanathana Dharma, a society based on self-realization or spiritual awakening to our eternal Dharma, our eternal spiritual nature. What is that? To answer this question, one must know oneself. Who am I? Can this body define me? Can this mind? Can this family that I live in or was born into, this nation, this religion, whatever I was born into, am I more than all of these combined? When one knows that one is a spiritual being, and that the body is just a vehicle or garment that one uses for a few years and then discards, when one understands this principle, which is the core teaching of the Vedas, of the Bhagavad Gita for that matter, then one gets to know that the purpose of life is not just to accumulate stuff, is not just to enjoy our senses, but is to reclaim our true spiritual identity and to get out of the cycle of birth and death, which we've been trapped in for thousands of years. When one understands that pursuing pleasure, happiness, prosperity, respect, or even love through things or people can never bring about that which we desire, then we are ready to create an awakened society. Today we will explore what such a society looks like. What are the values, the key values, the beliefs and ideologies that hold such a society together? Together, we will explore and learn from the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, revealed to us by the wisest people who ever lived on this planet. Hello, welcome. So, Vedic society divided the world into four social classes. The Brahmins, who were the priests, the scholars. Let me put this out on the screen for you. Maybe you'll get a better idea. All right. So you had the Brahmins, who were the priests, the scholars, the Kshatriyas, who were the politicians, soldiers, the Vaishyas, who were the entrepreneurs, and the Shudra, or the business people, shall we say, and the Shudras, who were in the service industry. That's what we call that today. These same divisions exist in our world at present as well, except we don't use those names. Those are ancient Sanskrit names. But we do have a society that has various classes, whether you call them the wealthy, the upper middle class, the middle class, or you divide it by financial status, or you divide it by our jobs or our careers. However you divide it, however you look at it, not everyone's the same. The people who live in the fancy gated communities are different from those that live homeless on the street, or those who live and work, in, let's say, the service industry, like, say, a grocery store or a fast food chain. Those people cannot afford to live in those fancy gated communities, not unless their parents happen to live there as well. But the point being that a lot of times people think, oh, this is a horrible thing. There were social classes, really? Please, let's stop being pretentious. We, in this society, whether you live in the West or you live in the East, it doesn't matter. We all have social differences between us. There are cultural differences between us. We are not all the same. And that was the case in the Vedic time as well. So they divided society into these 4 types of people. And this was based upon one's aptitude and one's actions. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Chatur Varnam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasa. Guna and karma, 2 words. It is based on your guna, which meant your qualities, your aptitude, and your karma, your actions. You may have talent, but if you don't use it, what's the use of that? Now, besides that, there were also 4 spiritual classes of people. And these were known as the brahmachari, who's a student. I'll tell you more about the kind of students and education they had at that time. It's different than what we have today. Then there was the grihastha, or the householder, the married person, the person who was a family person, right? Kids, wife, children, husband, whatever. Then there was the vanaprastha, someone who was starting to get detached from family life and practicing renunciation. Finally, there was the sannyasi, or the renunciate. Now, what was all this about? This was about a society that was preparing for detachment from the world. Why? We're going to talk about that some more as we go along. But they understood that this world, with all of its allurements, with all of its possibilities, was simply an illusion. Ultimately, it wasn't going to fulfill our deepest desires. Our deepest desires, which were to be happy, to be loved, to be at peace, to be satisfied, to feel good. That is what we've been pursuing, the pursuit of happiness. And has anyone found it? Have you? Can you say that beyond a few moments that you're truly happy and that you're truly satisfied and you're truly content and you're peaceful? Yeah, for a few moments it can happen, sure. Does it last? Is it dependent on external circumstances or situations or things? Exactly. Once we start looking a little deeper, going beyond the surface, we realize what works and what, that this whole system we have going on here doesn't really work. So let's take a look at these 4 different categories of people. The brahmachari, the student, was from age 0 to say, no, not 0, like 5 to about 20, 25. At that time, the student went to live with the guru or the teacher. It was important for them to learn to control their senses. That was one of the most fundamental things that they learned at the house of the guru. How to control one's senses and one's mind. And you might say, oh, what is that? Why do you need to learn to control your senses and your mind? Because only then can you learn to focus your attention on what matters. You notice our kids today with their ADHD and their various other issues that they have and all the gizmos and gadgets that they've got. They're very distracted. We are a distracted world today with the spread of all this technology everywhere. By the way, I'm not against technology, but I'm just looking at the effects it's had. It's created a world of people who are just distracted. They're not present. They're not present to what's going on in front of them. They'll be eating food and watching TV at the same time, or talking to somebody else and looking at their phone. They're not present. They're in a beautiful place and they're busy taking pictures. They're not present to the beauty that is there or the person that is there. So they were taught to control their mind. And that's another big thing we notice. There's so much of mental illness. It's one of the biggest problems that we face. Why? Because we were never taught to control our mind and our sense and their senses. Both the mind and the senses were important to be controlled. And that then was in the area of food, in the area of clothing, in the area of entertainment, everything. All of that. You learn to eat a restricted diet, not just anything and everything your tongue craves. You learn to dress simply. You learn to make everything simple. And that created a society of people that were well behaved and gentle. The student had to be submissive and friendly with the guru, the spiritual master, the spiritual teacher who they lived with, who was raising them. They didn't go to these kind of schools here. They lived on the earth, in the forest, in nature. And they were taught how to grow things and how to interact with nature and to respect the animals and to respect each other. They were taught to chant mantras and study the Vedas. So it was a very tremendous study in which they learned all the different arts, whether that was that of being a politician or a business person according to their aptitude. They were taught those different arts. But at the same time, they were also taught how to be human, because that's more important than just learning mathematics and geography and history and all of that stuff. First step, one has to learn how to be a human being and what that is. They were also taught in restraining their senses to associate with the opposite sex only for important business and not otherwise. For the senses are so powerful that they can agitate the mind. Now, you know, as you become teenagers, that's exactly what happens. In our teenagers today, it's rampant. That attraction, that the whole chemical stuff that is happening in their bodies and that drives them crazy. They learned how to tame all of that, not by just restricting oneself, but by actually learning to understand the reality of life, to understand the nature of this body. And of course, we'll discuss that much further today. So it says in the Bhagavatam that as long as one is not completely self-realized, that is free of the misconception of identifying with the body. So to be self-realized means to be free of the misconception of identifying with the body. Hold on, what does this mean? Is this not me? The Vedas tell you, no, this is not me. This body is a dress that I wear. It's like clothing. I can take off this clothing and put on some other clothing. In much the same way, the body is there with you for a few years, and then the soul, which is the real self, which is the real you, leaves this body and goes to another body. So the body is just a dress, an outfit that you're wearing. It's like a robot, like a computer. And I mean, the mind is more like the computer part of it. So this organism that we inhabit is not the real self, but we are identified with it, and that is the illusion. When we break that illusion, we begin to experience the real self, that which is behind the body-mind organism, that which is the operating force driving this body-mind organism, but which up till then was dormant, and we had no knowledge of it. That's the bewildering part. So, because we are under the influence of the body and the mind, this mind generates something called duality. It operates in an area that is referred to as dualistic. It is constantly thinking in terms of, I like this, I don't like this. I agree with this, I disagree with that. This is male, this is female, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. This is all the domain of the mind. To overcome that is vital on the path of self-realization. So that is what they were taught. To do that, they had to control the senses and the mind. And one of the things they had to learn was to also restrict themselves from the opposite sex, because that duality, that gender opposites, creates the greatest disturbance in the mind. And that is vital. Otherwise, it will deviate one from the path of detachment. It says here, any renunciate. So now not just the brahmachari, not just the student, but even the sannyasi who has taken a vow of celibacy must not indulge in in decorating the body or pampering it, or for that matter, eating things like meat or drinking wine, or you're just overindulging the pleasures of the senses. That permission is given to the grihastha, the householder, but not to the renunciate, not to the one who is desiring to renounce this world, who has understood the world for what it is. But even if one is now a householder, so from the student life, one came to the household life where one got married, had children, had a house, all of that. But even then, the idea was not to continue living there for the rest of your life, was to eventually start detaching oneself and moving away. So they said from the age 25 to 50, you be a householder, and after that, you start gradually spending less time in your home, let the kids take over. They now have their family, and you start to move out and start going to a holy place, a husband and wife, maybe a couple, they start moving out, going to various places of pilgrimage and start devoting themselves more and more to their spiritual pursuits. Now, it could be very strict according to the Vedas. In today's time, many of us might not be able to do some of these things as are described in the Bhagavatam right now. But just to get an idea of the high standards of that society, and then maybe try to emulate some of that, let's read a little bit here. So it says the Vanaprastha, the one who is now learning how to detach themselves from their family life, should not eat grains, should live in a thatched cottage or cave only to keep the sacred fire, should practice enduring snowfall, wind, fire, rain, and the shining of the sun, should wear matted locks of hair on their head and let their body hair, nails, and mustache grow, should not cleanse the body of dirt, should keep a water pot, deerskin, and rod, wear the bark of a tree as a covering, should remain in the forest for at least 1 year and not be disturbed or troubled by too much austerity. Only when one is being troubled by disease or old age and is unable to perform these prescribed duties for spiritual advancement, one should practice fasting and not taking any food for periods of time. So much of this is extreme for us in today's time. However, to whatever degree we can practice detachment from our worldly life, it is advisable to try, and then it could be as simple as just simplifying our household life and increasing the time we spend on spiritual activities, starting to spend more and more of our time realizing that the end is coming for all of us. None of us is here forever. By giving up bodily affinity, one should cease from material existence as flames cease when the wood in which they are burning is consumed. It says the body is being consumed. It is gradually being burnt up, just as in a fire. When the material body is returned to its various material elements, only the spiritual being remains. So what remains? When the body is ultimately lost and either buried or burnt, what remains? That is the soul. That is eternal. That has always existed and will always exist. It is energy, and therefore can neither be created nor destroyed. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when I, that is Krishna, did not exist, nor you, he's talking to Arjun, nor all these people who are assembled here. And never will there be a time when we shall cease to be. For one who is born, it is certain that he will die, and for one who has died, it is certain he will be born again. Right? So that spiritual being is qualitatively none different than the Supreme Being or Parabrahman. In other words, you and I are none different in our spiritual essence. We are none different than God. Does it mean we are God? No. Just like a drop of water from the ocean is none different than the ocean, we are none different than God. However, the drop of water does not have the power or the magnificence or the scope or the size of the ocean. It's a whole different thing. And then finally, we come to the life of the sannyasi, person who has fully renounced everything. And it said that such a person should renounce all material connections and merely keep the body inhabitable. Such a person should travel from one place to another, passing only one night in each village. In this way, without catering to the needs of the body, he should travel all over the world. Excuse me. Ideally, such a person should wear only a loincloth, have a stick, and a bowl. So you might have seen monks and mendicants who are like that. Again, this is an ideal of a society, and we'll talk about why it works and why it led to such amazing spiritual growth and development. And it even led to India at that time being one of the most prosperous countries in the world, having almost 30% of the GDP of the entire world. So that's, even in the last 1,000 years or so. So this was the culture behind it, and understanding that culture is very important. It says the sannyasi should be completely satisfied in the self. This is such an important line, to be satisfied in the self. How does one be satisfied in the self? This cannot happen as long as you are always living here in your head. If you are constantly here in your mind will never be satisfied. It isn't by nature never satisfied. And therefore it must be tamed. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, for one whose mind is under control, it will be the best of friends. For one who has failed to control their mind, it will be the greatest enemy. So one has to tame the mind, because this is what's blocking you from accessing the soul. And once you have connected with that spiritual part of you and you start living from there, the soul is already self-satisfied. It doesn't need anything. Doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to be anything, doesn't need to achieve anything. It's self-satisfied. So the sannyasi should be completely, the renunciate, the monk, should be completely satisfied in the self, should live on alms, beg from door to door, and not be dependent on any person or place, and should always be friendly well-wisher to all living beings and be a peaceful devotee of God. Such a person should always see the Supreme pervading everything and see everything, including the universe, resting on the Supreme. Why is this significant here? Because if you'll notice, it's talking about a person who loves everyone, who is not trying to preach a certain religion or trying to convert people to a certain way, but is simply saying, hey, I love all of you. So this is a way, a path that is all-inclusive, and that the evolved souls show the way on how that is done. Whereas in the last few thousand years, we've seen so much of war and bloodshed in the name of religion. That is why the Vedic culture is not called a religion, it is called Dharma. Sanathana, the eternal, Dharma. Dharma meaning the nature of who we are. It's not a belief system. It is not a set of codes, nor is it a particular book, nor is it something that has to be done. It is perfectly customized to each person and every situation. It has a basic theme behind it. And once one understands that, because one can understand it scientifically, can understand it practically, you can begin to see that, oh, so this is not telling me that I have to believe this, that, or the other. It's telling me about who I am and what it takes for me to live in harmony with other human beings, animals, and nature itself. And then from there, of course, we can go and explore the bigger topics of who is God and where we go after death and this, all of that good stuff. But, right? And it continues now in the Bhagavatam, saying literature without spiritual benefit should be rejected, especially by such a person who is renunciate. And one should not waste time indulging in arguments and counter-arguments, nor take shelter in any cause or faction. Such a person who is renounced must not give discourses or gather disciples as a means to increase opulence. And we see a lot of people doing that these days. In human society, such a person should appear as a restless child and, although a great orator, appear dumb and foolish. Such a different way of looking at things, isn't it? Now, the scene shifts. In this part of the Bhagavatam, the sage Narad starts to talk about Prad. Prad was a young 5-year-old boy who we'd read about earlier, and how he's being persecuted by his father. And ultimately, Vishnu incarnated as Narsingha and killed his father. So this boy Prad went on to become the king by the grace and the order, actually, of Narsingha. And one day Prad, now a king, older, was going on a tour of the universe along with his associates to study the nature of saintly persons. Notice how they say, went on a tour of the universe, right? Apparently they had the ability to do that, and to do that at rapid speed. It wasn't like they're going to be there for, a place that's 20 light years away, so they're going to spend 20 years on some UFO or some kind of ship traveling at the speed of light. No. They had the ability to do that through different processes that involved meditation. And through those meditative abilities, they could travel through time and space. So he was on a tour of the universe along with his associates to study the nature of saintly persons. At the bank of the river Kaveri was a mountain known as Saya. There he found a deeply spiritually advanced saintly person who was lying on the ground covered with dirt and dust. He had adopted a python's method of livelihood and appeared to be quite fat. So Prahlad was kind of like bewildered. He'd heard about this person. He went up to him. He'd heard he was a very saintly man, so he touched his feet. That's the way in the sanathana Dharma, the Vedic culture, to show respect to a highly evolved person. He touched his feet and submissively inquired. So notice he's not challenging, he's submissively inquiring from him. He says, "My dear sir, you undergo no endeavor to earn your livelihood, but you have a stout or fat body, exactly like that of a materialistic enjoyer. I know that if one is very rich and has nothing to do, he becomes extremely fat by eating and sleeping and performing no work. You, on the other hand, are fully in knowledge of transcendence and are learned, expert, and intelligent in every way. You have nothing to do. Unlike people in general who are engaged in karmic activities, you are lying here inactive. You have no money for sense enjoyment. How then has your body become so fat? If you do not consider my question impudent, kindly explain how this has happened." So the saintly Brahmin replied, "Narayan, the Supreme Godhead, is predominant within the core of your heart because you are a pure devotee." He's telling Prahlad. The Supreme Being drives away the darkness of ignorance, just as the sun drives away the darkness of the universe. There's a very beautiful line in the Vedas, Tamaso ma jyotirgamaha, that the light of the divine drives away the darkness of tamas, of ignorance. That this kind of knowledge is here to illuminate our minds, to awaken our soul. So, Jyotirgamaha, that is the light of this wisdom. That is the light of what is being taught here. And while it does seem to be in contradiction to our way of living, that is because we are living in darkness and this light is coming to wake us up. So he says, Narayan, the Supreme Being, also known as Vasudev, Krishna, Hari, so many names, He drives away the darkness of ignorance just as the sun drives away the darkness of the universe. Although you know everything, Pralad, yet you have asked me some wonderful questions. I was being carried away. So this saintly fat person was saying, I was being carried away by the waves of insatiable material desires, engaging in different activities and struggling for existence. After many lives of pursuing sense gratification in various species, I came into the human form of life, and then I noticed that the conditioned soul living within the body forgets his self-interest. So that's all of us, right? The conditioned soul, we're all conditioned. You say, what does condition mean? Because who are we? We really don't know ourselves. We don't know the real self. We know this body, mind. And all of this was programmed by society, parents, media, friends. We're a collection of all of that information, our schools, our TVs, our whatever else we watched and came across. We are just an assimilation of all of that. But if you took away all that, if a person lost their memory, for example, what would they be? Nothing. They wouldn't know how to function even. Right? So we're a collection of all these memories, of all these events, of all these things we've been taught, from our language to everything else. So he says, the conditioned soul living within the body forgets his self-interest because he identifies himself with the body and is thus attracted by the varieties of objects in the world as he struggles and suffers the miseries of material existence. Men and women unite for sensual pleasure of sex, but by actual experience we have observed that none of them are happy. These miseries of material existence, what did he mean by that? It's very interesting. There are three kinds of miseries that are talked about in the Vedas. Miseries that are caused by our own body and mind, and you get sick or you're hungry, or that's a misery, and you're now trying to alleviate that. Or even as you age or you get older and eventually as you're dying. So that's the misery caused by the body. There's miseries caused by our mind. Our mind is unhappy, disturbed, angry, emotional, fearful, anxious, so many things, right? All of that is miseries caused by the mind. So miseries caused by our own body, mind, organism. Miseries caused by other people. So people might say something to you, might do something to you, and that causes a set of miseries. And then there's miseries caused by nature. Might be too cold, might be too hot, might be all kinds of things, raining, it might be snowing, it might be all kinds of situations happening in nature. Those cause us miseries. So different kinds of miseries, and we're constantly working to alleviate those miseries. He says here, just as a deer, because of ignorance, cannot see the water within a well covered by grass, but runs after the water elsewhere, the living entity, covered by the material body, does not see the happiness within himself, but rather runs after happiness in the world. What does he mean, happiness within himself? Our very nature is ananda, anandamayo bhyasat. We are joyous beings. We were meant to be that always. We are designed as that. But because we have disconnected from our true self, we're not feeling it. And because we're not feeling it, we're chasing it. What? Chasing happiness. The pursuit of happiness is enshrined within our social fabric. Everyone feels they have the right to be happy. And we go around asking everyone. And if you ask a parent, for example, what do you want for your children? I just want them to be happy. Or you ask someone who loves someone, what do you want for your partner or your spouse? I just want them to be happy. But I'm not able to make them happy. Yeah, you can't. You can't make anyone happy. Not your children, not your partner, no one. You can't even make yourself happy. No. It's not going to happen no matter what you feed yourself or give yourself, no matter what clothing or cars or houses or this or that or wealth that you get, you still cannot make yourself happy. Happiness is not something you can acquire. Happiness is something that you are. And unless you find who you are, you cannot find the key to happiness. So he says here, being fully under the control of material nature. Oh yeah, we are under the control of material nature. We're under the control of this body. When it tells us it wants to eat, we go and serve it, right? We go cook, we go clean, we do whatever we have to feed it, because otherwise it's hungry and it will be upset with us if we don't feed it. We follow the dictates of our mind. So who's in charge out here? Am I in charge of my body and mind, or is my body and mind in charge of me? Who's serving who? You see? And if I'm here constantly at the beck and call of my body and mind and doing whatever they want, or I'm believing whatever they say and being fed by whatever they tell me, then I'm in a very pathetic mess. Because I'm not free. I'm controlled. And then I'm controlled by the circumstances of life, and I'm controlled by my job and my family and my demands of others. So he says here, being fully under the control of material nature, all his plans, one after another, are ultimately baffled. Plans for what? For happiness. He suffers miseries caused by his body, mind, other people, and nature, even though he may appear successful. So even the most successful person cannot escape birth, death, old age, and disease. Those who are considered materially powerful and rich are always full of anxieties because of government laws, thieves, rogues, enemies, family members, the inevitable time factor, and even their own selves. They are invariably afraid. The original cause of lamentation, illusion, fear, anger, and attachment, poverty and unnecessary labor, is the desire for unnecessary prestige and money. So now he goes on to explain, this is the philosophy that he has, but now he goes to explain why he's doing what he's doing, because he was being asked, he was living his life like a python. You know what a python does, right? It just lays there. And then when some creature comes along, it just grabs it and swallows it up whole. That's right. So he says the bee and the python are two excellent teachers who show us how to be satisfied by collecting only a little and how to stay in one place and not move. From the bumblebee, I have learned to be unattached to accumulating money. For although money is as good as honey, anyone can kill its owner and take it away. He's talking about how we live with fear. I do not endeavor to get anything, but am satisfied with whatever is achieved in its own way. So this is a good takeaway right here. We do need to earn money, and you and I might not be able to do what he's doing, but we can do this. We can be satisfied with whatever is achieved without too much effort, without too much struggle, without too much stress. That we can do, to be satisfied. He says, if I do not get anything, I am patient and unagitated like a python, and I lie down in this way for many days. Sometimes I eat a very small quantity, and sometimes a great quantity. Sometimes the food is very palatable, and sometimes it is stale. Sometimes the food is given with great respect, and sometimes neglectfully. Sometimes I eat during the day, and sometimes at night. Thus I eat what is easily available. To cover my body, I use whatever is available, whether it be linen, silk, cloth, bark, or deerskin, according to my destiny, and I am fully satisfied and unagitated. See, this is the part that we need to really learn from, to be unagitated. How can you be unagitated, undisturbed, unaffected by the circumstances, the situations, the places, the people, the food, the whatever, right? How can you be unagitated, undisturbed by all of these circumstances? So he's showing us his way. We can learn and try to incorporate as much of that as we can within our life. So he says, sometimes I lie on the surface of the earth, sometimes on leaves, grass, or stone, sometimes on a pile of ashes, or sometimes, by the will of others, in a palace on a first-class bed with pillows. Sometimes I bathe myself very nicely, smear sandalwood pulp all over my body, put on flower garland, and dress in fine garments and ornaments. Then I travel like a king on the back of an elephant or on a chariot or horse. Sometimes, however, I travel naked like a person haunted by a ghost. Different people are of different mentalities. I therefore neither praise nor criticize them. I only desire their welfare, hoping that they will one day seek liberation. In that description of his, where he's talking about wearing fine garments and then sometimes just traveling naked like a person haunted by a ghost, it's really important to understand that he is not identified with either situation. He doesn't think of himself as either rich or poor, or having or not having. He's not caught up in those dualities. And therefore, he does not praise or criticize anyone. How is one able to get to this place? That is the place beyond duality. That's what we need to investigate. You see, the mind, as I said to you earlier, is by nature dualistic. It will like or dislike something. It will feel, oh, this is a good place to sleep and this is not a good place. This is good food to eat. This is not good. This is what it's constantly doing. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. But to reach a place of being non-dualistic, such as this person, we have to become free of the mind. It is what is creating this dichotomy. It is what is creating our suffering. But this person has become free of his mind. And because of that, he's able to be in any circumstance and feel good regardless. Because the feeling of good, or what you call feeling good, comes from within, is not driven by the world. It is driven by something that lies within himself. And he's in control of that. And he's not giving that power either to the world or to people or to situations or circumstances or anything else. He has kept that power within himself. And because he does not suffer from the malady of duality, he does not need to praise or criticize anyone. Right? He simply wishes their welfare, hoping that they will one day seek liberation as he has done. Dear Prad, he says, you are certainly a self-realized soul and a devotee of the Supreme Godhead. You do not care for public opinion and so-called scriptures. For this reason, I have described to you without hesitation the history of my self-realization. Prad then took his blessings and left for his home. This whole narrative continues. So the king Yudhishthir, this whole conversation is happening between King Yudhishthir, who was the eldest of the Pandavas and who became the king of Hastinapur. This is the story of the Mahabharata. If you haven't read it, please do. So he's talking with Narad, the great Rishi, the great highly evolved being Narad. And he's asking him, how may we who live at home with our family also attain liberation? So he said, you've been talking about all these renounced people and, all students and sannyasis and, but we're householders, we're family people. Like, what are we supposed to do? So Narad says, okay, you're right. Householders must work to earn their livelihood. But instead of trying to enjoy the results of their work, they should offer the fruits or the results of their work to Vasudeva or Krishna. Meaning, to understand that whatever you receive as your salary or as your income or whatever else, the fruit of your work, the acknowledgement, the praise from what you do, all of that, you give the credit to God. Because it is only by the mercy of God that you have the intelligence that you have, the body that you have, the capabilities that you have, which others may or may not. You've also been blessed with the education you have. All of that was not your doing. You were born into a certain family in a certain situation, which then led you to have a certain level of success in this world. The point being that whether it is that you have a lot or little, either way, whatever you receive is by the grace of God. To see that is to see reality, is to look past the blinders that we all wear, thinking, I did this. That's the ego. and it's my achievement, and this is how great I am, this is how wonderful I am, I proved myself, my worth, my value, look at this beautiful house and car and everything else that I have. That's the ego. Instead, recognize that everything you have and everything you do is all by the grace of the divine, of God, who we refer to as Vasudeva or Krishna. To learn how to do this, one should associate with saintly persons and hear the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Being. Thus, one will gradually become detached from family life, like one waking from a dream. One should be unattached to family affairs, although externally appearing to be very much attached. One should be determined not to create a cumbersome life in which the purpose of life will not be fulfilled. For example, creating a lot of debt, creating a lot of stuff that you have to stress for you to work on. You have to work hard, and you have to struggle, and you have to make your ends meet. No. Keep it simple. One may claim proprietorship to as much wealth as required to maintain body and soul together through minimum endeavor. One who desires proprietorship over more than that must be considered a thief by the laws of nature. One should treat animals as one's own children. How little difference there is between children and these innocent animals. If only people would understand this, they would stop killing animals and eating them. They're no different than our children. They're simple and they are innocent and they need to be protected. Some people say, oh, that line that says in the Bible that a man has dominion over the animals. So that means you can do whatever you want with them. No. A king has dominion over his subjects. He protects them. He doesn't go and eat them. Right? At some point, it even says a man has dominion over his wife. Doesn't mean he goes and eats her. He protects her. So the way people twist things around is absolutely incredible. The householder must contribute towards the maintenance of the poor and destitute. One's home and spouse should be offered for the reception of guests and people in general. So this is about recognizing that everything is given to me by God, and I need to be able to serve the community through what I have, by sharing what I have, by opening up my doors. Not just, oh, this is mine, I'm going to enjoy it to the best of my ability. No, nothing is mine. No one is mine. This is very important to understand. I will leave this world at some point. I'll leave all of it behind, everyone and everything that I have. So whose is it? Not mine. I can't take it with me. I only have it for a few years and then it's gone. One so seriously considers his spouse or to be his own that he sometimes kills himself for her or kills others. If one can give up his attachment to his spouse, he will conquer the Supreme Godhead who is never conquered by anyone. So again, it means to recognize that this person who I might be in love with, or might be my partner, or might be married to, doesn't belong to me. No one is mine. No thing is mine, and no one is mine. Everything belongs to the Supreme Godhead, the Supreme Being. Attachment to one's body or mind, or the body of one's loved one, is extremely powerful. See, attachment is the problem. Attachment to the things you own, attachment to the people you care about, attachment to this body and mind. This body will ultimately be transformed into ashes, small insects, or stool, right? So, I mean, if it was burnt and ashes, small insects, if you were burying it, bugs that will come and start eating it up, and if it was left somewhere, you died out in the wilderness, well, then some animals might come eat it and then it would be turned into stool. What is the value of this insignificant body? How much greater is the Supreme Being who is all-pervading like the sky? What does it mean by all-pervading like the sky? It means that Supreme Being is not just someone sitting up there in some heaven, but it's also in every atom of the creation, is in every one of us, as the Param Atma, the great soul who is sitting within every one of us, waiting for that moment and will turn and say, hey, I want to connect with you. I want to know you. I want to love you. One should worship the Supreme Godhead who is situated in everyone's heart every day and eat the remnants of food offered to him. One should honor the Brahmins or the priests and perform the various rituals prescribed for householders on the auspicious days and times prescribed. O king of the earth, Yudhishthir, it has been decided by expert learned scholars that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, in whom all that is moving or non-moving within the universe is resting, and from whom everything is coming, only he is the best person to whom everything must be given. By pleasing him, one can please all living entities. An example was given to me once of how when you water a tree or a plant, you water the roots, not just the individual leaves or branches. In much the same way, when you please the source of everything, the divine being, the supreme Godhead, Krishna, then you satisfy everyone. But most important are those who are dear to God, who have dedicated themselves, who have devoted themselves, the devotees. The devotees of the Supreme Lord sanctify the universe by speaking about his glories throughout the world. They are worshipable even for him, that is Krishna, who is the heart and soul of all creation. So I'm going to stop over here, and I'd love to know your comments. If you've got something that you've been thinking about as I was speaking, if you have any thoughts, please let me know. I'd love to hear. I so far don't see anything written or typed out. I would love if you guys had it all typed out and I could just respond to your comments right away. But let's see. Anybody have any thoughts that you want to share? Okay. Nothing? No questions? No thoughts? No comment on what we read through? All right. Well, then I'll see you next week. Take care. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.